Danielle, thank you so much for joining me. How are you today?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. Thanks again for joining. I want to just start and let the audience know a little bit about you and your background. Tell me about your career path and what's led you to your role as Chief People Officer at Emburse.
Yeah, so it was a little bit of a non-traditional career path. I actually started in software as an implementation specialist. And one of the things that was most notable to me when I started was the experience that I had onboarding in the recruitment team. And that stuck with me. And I thought, this is what I really should be doing. And so I had to take a step back and think about how I wanted to get there, considering I didn't have a background in human resources and, I was fresh out of college. Um, I took the only approach I knew how. And so I went to an agency and started as a technical recruiter. And so I took those skills and then I moved them to my next company where I added on some HR skills, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. And so, here I am. This was certainly not in my plan, but it's something that I was given an incredible opportunity to take on. And I've had this great growth opportunity within Emburse and just taken full advantage of it.
Great. What do you currently do in your role?
So in my current role, I oversee and I guide the strategic direction for talent acquisition, for HR operations, learning and development, total rewards, and really just the overall employee experience at Emburse.
Yeah, that's all of those things are getting a lot of talk right now. We're talking about
Yeah,
great resignations and companies trying to really beef up their offerings and make the employees happy, make a better employee experience. So you must be very
exactly.
busy right now.
We are. You add COVID into the mix, and it just doesn't stop. So
Yeah,
but it's
yeah.
exciting. It's a really fun time to be part of people operations.
All right, let's move into our first segment, story time.
To story time. Story time. Story
Let
time.
me tell you a story.
The last 2 years, we just mentioned COVID. The last 2 years have been really hard on most of us, if not all of us. What have you changed at the workplace because of the pandemic, and how has that impacted the experience, the employee experience?
Sure. So, I mean, as we knew, COVID came up on us really unexpectedly, and it felt like almost overnight we had to change to a virtual first model. So, with that, we were really forced to examine how we work and figure out how adaptable we could be within the current context of the workplace. I think about, parents had no childcare. There were people at home with cats and dogs, walking on their keyboards and what have you. We've all heard the stories. I mean, myself, when COVID hit, I had a 2-year-old and I was very, very pregnant with my second child. And so my whole company ended up getting to know my 2-year-old. And then after my maternity leave, they were used to me bouncing on an exercise ball trying to soothe the baby to sleep. So, we got very personal with people pretty quickly. Um, with that, as an organization, we made a very conscious decision to allow for flexible work schedules and give each other as much grace as possible during this period of time. That was incredibly important to us. But, it's something where not every industry has the ability to do this. And that was really, it was really eye-opening to me to be here during this time and think about how fortunate we were and think of it really as a luxury. And I think what that did was it really forced us to take advantage. It almost like we felt like we had a responsibility to make sure that our employees felt supported during this time because we had that luxury. And so our mission at Emburse is to humanize work, and that's our external mission, and it's also our internal mission. And that really helped us stay strong during the pandemic. So some of the things that we did, other than being able to be, flexible and supportive of people with their families and with everything that they had personally going on, we made some other small shifts as well. For example, how we communicated to the organization. So the senior team, we went from quarterly all hands to bi-weekly virtual coffee chats. And that seems like a lot, but it was needed. People needed over communication at that time. We've started to wind that down a little bit, but during that period of time where there was heightened anxiety and people just didn't know what the future held, we wanted to make sure that we were easing their minds as much as possible. We also had some onboarding challenges. You have remote employees who used to come into the office, meet people, create personal connections. And then all of a sudden there's a 4-hour HR onboarding on their first day, and then they're kind of thrown to the wolves. And, some managers are fantastic with it when it comes to onboarding, and some need a little bit of extra help. And so, the HR team took it in their hands to create this new initiative called the new hire meet and greet. And so within a period of time, every new hire would meet in a social setting. Yes, it was via Zoom, but in a social setting where they could really get to know people. And that's where they created more connections. They weren't being, force fed all of this company information and trying to make, create relationships all at the same time. They were given this period of time to adjust and then come back and say, these are the people that are in my cohort. These are the people that I can count on. These are the people that are in a similar situation as me, and got a lot of really good feedback from that. In addition, Zoom was like a Zoom fatigue. Everyone's heard of Zoom fatigue. And so we had to adjust to that. And one of the small tweaks that we made there was avoiding recurring meetings on Fridays. So we basically said, if you have to have a meeting on Friday, take a meeting on Friday if it's super important. But let's give that as space for people to really get their work done and focus and, wrap up the previous week and get ready for the next week. Because let's give that as space, back-to-back Zoom meetings all of a sudden. So those are some of the small tweaks that we made. But I mean, really, overall, the shift to being employee experience centric is really paid off for us. I think, we've allowed people to tell us what they need, and we've had to shift to what they need. We're not perfect. We have to pivot often, but it's helped with our employee loyalty in a way that I couldn't possibly imagine. The Great Resignation has obviously impacted us, but not in the way that I think we expected it to.
Yeah. Let me ask you, how are you hearing from employees? You said they're telling you what you need. How often are you hearing from them, and how are you doing?
There's a few different ways. One is that we have an anonymous email where people are able to fill in it's a Google form where they ask leadership questionnaire, if you will. And they submit that. It comes to myself and it comes to another member of the communications team. We take a look at it and we decide how we're going to respond to that, whether or not we need to get someone else involved, whether it's something that we can respond to on our own. We also conduct quarterly engagement surveys through employee net promoter score surveys. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
I am, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we take the feedback very seriously from those surveys. We have initiatives that we launch on a quarterly basis. We report on those initiatives in our quarterly all hands so people understand where we're going with that. In addition to that, I just mentioned these virtual coffee chats. And what that was, it was a way for us to connect with employees, but the format there is that they're submitting questions to us and we're answering them live. So we send out a pre-meeting survey in case people have some burning questions that they want to get in. And then we open it up during the session as well. So there are questions that are answered live. And then in every all hands, we also have a section for Q&A. So we're doing a lot to gather feedback from folks, and we're doing our best to respond to it.
Yeah, you mentioned I heard you say when you have employees fill out that Google form, you meet with your internal comms folks. I have an internal comms background and always really partner closely with my HR buddy.
Yes.
Everywhere they went, I went, and vice versa. Can you talk about that relationship and how they might help you in your role?
Oh my gosh, yes. So we didn't have an internal comms team until a few years ago, and I don't know how I did my job without them. I partner so closely with this team. Not only did they help me really think about how to frame the messaging, but they're coming up with creative ways to even just get it out there, right? So it's not just everything's an email or everything is mentioned in a meeting. There are very creative ways in which we can communicate to to our employees. And there are ways in which we hit different audiences with different messages. There are communications plans, it's not just a one and done. It's a complete rollout. And they have just really upped our game when it comes to how we interact with the people that we work with. I'm so grateful for that team. I'm just so grateful for that team.
Give you a little shout out to the internal comms team at Emburse.
Yes, they're fantastic.
Yeah, that's great to hear. That might come up because I want to move into the next segment called Getting Tactical.
Yeah, sure.
I'm trying to figure out tactics. And to be perfectly honest,
And I want to talk about how you're creating this employee experience. And I'd love to hear, anytime you can talk about your relationship with your internal comms team, I'm always interested in hearing, a good leader's perspective on how that's going. But I want to talk about offices are opening back up again. What are you doing about this? And what is your new normal? I kind of hate saying new normal. I know it's kind of overused. But what does normal now look like for the employees at Emburse?
So, we shifted to this, like I said, virtual first model. But then as things started to normalize, in air quotes, we decided that we wanted to create a hybrid work environment. And this is for a few different reasons, but mainly because we feel very strongly about the culture within Emburse and that it's not in our DNA to be remote only. Personal connections for us are incredibly important, and we have a lot of people that want to go back into the office. So this is obviously challenging, right? So hybrid is not really easy to pull off in all scenarios. We just had an all hands that was hybrid that we presented outside of or in Barcelona last week. And we had more technical issues than I would have liked, but we learned from that. And so it's constantly learning from that. And really what we want to make sure of is that people have space to collaborate with each other and places where they feel comfortable and supported. That might be at home for some people. That might be in the office for some people. That might be both for some people. And so we want to be able to give people what it is that they need to be the most productive and the happiest they can be in their work environment.
I love that. That's fantastic. I mean, I personally know that I can benefit if I would go in like a day a week, maybe 2 hours here, 6 hours there. I would love that opportunity. Of course, I work across the country from my office. So, but I love that. So, how are you ensuring that there's an maybe this is you and the internal comms person working together, but ensuring there's an equitable and good employee experience for both employees who are fully home, employees who are fully in, and employees who are both in and out. And a good example would be the all hands, right? 4 years ago, all hands, if you were on the phone, you weren't really included. You were just on the phone while everyone else was in the room. Now, where it's different, their expectations are different. So I'd love to hear what you have to think about that.
Yeah, I think technology has a lot to do with it. Making sure that you have the tools in place to create a seamless experience for people. Practicing what that might look like is important. Rehearsals, as crazy as that might sound for an all hands, a rehearsal is incredibly important. If you don't do a rehearsal, you don't see some of the issues that could come up. When you have a hybrid meeting in the office, you have to make sure that you've got the right camera angles, that you've got the right audio input, that, you don't have two people that are in the room talking to each other and the person on the screen can only hear every third word. So it's investing in that technology to make sure that people feel included. And I think that's incredibly important as we go forward. And, not only that, but it's making sure that there are norms for people when it comes to meetings. It's not okay for those two people on the side to have a little side conversation. That person, whether or not they can hear it, which they should if you have the right technology, but whether or not they can hear it, they still feel a little bit left out. So how can we make sure that it is an inclusive environment? And what are some of those meeting norms that we can put together to make sure that people do feel supported and that they can be productive in that setting?
Hearing you talk about that made me think, one of the most common, I don't call it issue, or maybe just an issue, it's not a problem, that I know that HR folks, that I'm hearing from HR folks faced is managers didn't know how to manage remotely. I could see the look on your face. You know what I'm talking about. So I'm wondering how you're working with people managers, maybe over the past 2 years and even now, getting everyone comfortable with this. And how do you manage someone if you're in Maine and they're in Milwaukee? How do you do that? Different time zones, different countries.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, it was really eye-opening when this happened because there were so many people leaders who thought, we can't work remote. I can't trust this person to work remote. I need to keep an eye on everything that they're doing. And it made everyone treat the people that they work with like adults. You are forced to trust them, And what did we find out? Oh, we found out that people know how to do their jobs and they can be trusted. They are adults. They're responsible adults who care about putting out a good work product. And the mindset had to shift, right? So we had to start moving away from micromanagement, and not every people leader was a micromanager by any means. For some people leaders, this was very easy, and we're a diversified workforce from a geography standpoint, and so we're used to managing teams of people in different locations in many cases. But there are teams that were always in the Portland office, in the LA office, in the Toronto office, and they had to be together, from 8:30 to 5:30 or whatever it was. And what we realize is it doesn't have to be like that. And so making sure that people leaders have the skill set that they need to manage through that is incredibly important, whether that is change management and that they understand how to get themselves through the change curve, whether that is coaching and feedback. There's less of a focus on let me manage every task that you're doing today and let me give you feedback and coach you on how to do things more productively. It's about creating space for people to be the most successful version of themselves. And that isn't necessarily just managing by metrics. Yes, that's part of it, but it's really how do I develop the people on my team to be the best that they can be? And so it's that shift has been an incredible experience for us here. And, we still have a long ways to go with it, but we had a lot of really open-minded people leaders. And I think because of that, we were able to successfully navigate, the most frustrating parts of the pandemic.
Yeah, that's such a good call. I feel like everyone I know who had to work who was working remote during the pandemic, and even now they work harder than they worked when they would go into
and
office.
that's a really good point though,
Yeah.
too, because some people were like, okay, I'm here with my computer. I don't have anywhere to go. Some people are alone in apartments in New York City. What are they going to do? They're going to work. And so we actually had to look at that too and make sure that that wasn't going to become an issue, because it did in some cases. And we needed to come up with ways to combat the burnout from that perspective, because it wasn't good for anyone.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that? I don't think this is common. I mean, I know I have felt this. I think everyone who's worked remote has felt this, right? My home office is in my home. I see it when I go to my bedroom, when I go to the the bathroom, when I go to the guest room. So it constantly there. And if I come in here, I'll just check my email real fast, and I never shut it down. And I think that's a very shared experience, right? You don't see anything weird working, not that working from home is ever weird, but it certainly is so common that it doesn't feel unusual to do it.
Yeah.
So what are you all doing to sort of combat that burnout? I know you said great resignation. Everyone's been impacted. I totally get that. But are there things you're doing to try to mitigate that burnout and keep your employees healthy, happy?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's a few things here. One of the things that we realized early on was that no one was taking time off. they were saying, I don't have anywhere to go. I don't need to take time off. And we realized it was getting bad. Some people were on the verge of mental breakdowns because they didn't have anything or anywhere to go. And so our solve for that, and temporary as it may be, was to create days that we called Emburse Unplugged days. And that was when we shut the entire company down. And it created space for people because if you were to take vacation time, if you will, you're still getting emails, you're still getting Slacks, regardless of whether or not people are respecting your time, there's always that email waiting for you. If you put together this situation where the entire organization is shut down and you give guidelines saying there is not to be any Slack, there is not to be any email, there are no meetings, and the leadership of the organization is following that, then it gives people that space to breathe. They can focus on, mental health, right? So maybe they don't have anywhere to go, but maybe they spend the day reading a book. Maybe they get to go outside for a walk. Maybe they get to walk their dog or, try a new recipe or something like that. Something that gives them a break from the monotony and, really helps them be more creative when they return. So combating burnout from that perspective was really important to us. We also thought it was a great opportunity for us to focus on employee education, learning and development. And so we started what we called Emburse Educate Days. Same idea here, where the entire company shuts down for the day and focuses on learning activities. So that might be, you're reading a specific book about something, you're attending a seminar, whether it's live or virtual. We had trainings that we put together on our products, on the market, on the direction of the organization for people that wanted a little bit more information there. It's evolved so that there are people teaching meditation classes now. So we're really just, what we had decided we wanted to do was create some space for people to use their minds in a different way. We love how passionate people are about their work here and how excited they get about the products that we create and the experience that we create. But they're even more creative when they have that space to do something for themselves personally.
Yeah. You mentioned that those education days. What was that? Emburse Educate? I know your background, your educational background is in adult education or a minor in education. I want to talk about how that helps to create a better employee experience. I'm assuming you helped implement those days, and how did you get to that idea? And how do you think that's helping the employee experience?
Yeah, so I think, my background in adult and higher education and, my minor in education during my bachelor's was really important in thinking about how adults learn, right? So it's different than how children learn. And we have to be able to meet adults in various ways to help them engage in what it is that we're trying to get them to engage with. So there is not one size fits all. As we know, there are various types of learning styles. And so we want to be able to provide variety there. And so I didn't come up with this on my own. I worked with our L&D manager. It was her idea. We just spun it out so that we were giving people opportunities to learn in various different formats, in whatever format suits them. And so that's how it came about. I think not only will we take that in how we educate our employees, but also just how we communicate in general to employees. I gave the shout out to the internal comms team earlier, but thinking about how an employee gets a message, right? Is it written? Is it verbal? Is it, are they visual? Yeah. So it's all of those different things. And just thinking about how we can meet employees where they are. Everyone is so different that you have to think of just different ways to do things so that it gets absorbed.
Right. Absolutely. I'm going to go into our last segment. It's called Asking for a Friend.
Just asking for a friend. Hey, asking for a friend.
What do you think are the biggest challenges the HR people world are going to face in the over the next, let's say, 5 years?
So I really think the future of work is all about employee experience. Um, Everything shifted with the pandemic. And as leaders, what we need to understand is what employees truly need and how we can realistically meet those needs. So we need to consider the whole employee here. There are basic needs that must be met. Absolute minimum stability. People don't need to have anxiety about whether or not their job is stable. They need a healthy income, they need healthy benefits. But we also need to start thinking about family, community, social and environmental impact. I mean, it expands, right? So previously, there used to be human resources that was focused on policy, procedure, compliance. Those things are obviously still incredibly important and they need to be focused on as well. But it goes so far beyond that where we really need to win over the hearts of our people. If we want an engaged workforce, that's going to be incredibly important as we go forward. And it's challenging, right? It's not obvious all the time. And so we need to be open-minded and we need to be able to adapt.
Yeah. As you're saying that, when you say, the human resources, it makes me think we got to really be thinking about that whole human, right? The holistic human and not just the work human. As you're bringing work, you mentioned, you were very pregnant, had a 2-year-old, you're bouncing your baby. That's part of now your human experience at work. And yeah, and I love how your company is thinking about that and being flexible and having some programs and initiatives around that.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm really
Great. Right. What advice would you give someone who's stepping into a role like yours for the first time, especially at this time, and this time and with the pandemic just sort of still here, remote work. What advice would you give someone who's in this role for the first time? Yeah, absolutely. Well, everyone I know is trying to get better at their jobs. What does that look like for you? Yeah. Is that coach like a mentor? Great. Well, Danielle, this has been a lot of fun. But before I let you go, is there anything you want to say that we didn't cover today? Yeah, it sounds like you do a really good job of bringing those to life, demonstrating those values.
We're trying. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Well, thank you so much. Let our listeners know where they can find you if they need to reach out.
Sure, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place. And then if you have any questions about our company, you're interested in a new opportunity, visit emburse.com/careers, and you can find out all about the team and what we're doing to humanize work.
That's great. It sounds like a great place to work, Danielle. So thank you so much for joining me today. This has been great.
Thank you. I appreciate it.